Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, my dear brothers, sisters, elders and respected scholars and all those who are watching from around the globe. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, today is part 2 and welcome to the second episode as we look closely at the sermons of Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam, and later on inshallah in the next series the sermons of Fatima Al Zahra alayhi salam, as well as understanding the lessons which in return can help us advance in our own life. Without a shadow of doubt, the sermons of Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam go down within history as one of the most powerful sermons delivered by the female gender, if not the most powerful sermon delivered by the female gender within history. Especially when you consider the context in which the speech was delivered in, the events which preceding the speech, the atmosphere at the time, the authority and rulership of whom the speech was addressing, and the society and its treatment of women at that time. And the one who is delivering the speech, which is Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam, and her great status. Today, inshallah, we shall be looking closely at the sermon of Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam, which was delivered in Sham, in the court of Yazid. But before we do, let's take you right back, okay? Right back to when she lived in Medina. It's important to mention this as it will hold a lot of context later on in our discussions. In Medina, Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam used to hold regular meetings, lessons and classes, whatever you wish to call them. She used to hold them for women in which she shared her knowledge and taught them many aspects of the religion. Her gatherings were extremely well known and regularly attended by many women in the community. And this happened very often. Her knowledge was so deep, so great that we all know, and I am sure you have heard multiple times before, the name given to her by Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam when he says, Zainab, you are alima ghayra muallima, meaning she who has knowledge without being taught. This is the knowledge of Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam and the status of Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam. So this is the context before Karbala. Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam was always involved in spreading knowledge. She spent her days, her weeks, her years dedicated to educating others, to spreading knowledge, to teaching Islam. And it saddens me when people reduce Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam to merely someone who had no choice but to speak up in these circumstances, these very unfortunate circumstances, which is not the case. As if she was never someone who was outspoken when it comes to education and knowledge. And when we have people in our own community who say, leave the Islamic education to the men, it's a man's responsibility to depart and spread knowledge, and the woman's role is to look after the house chores, for example, or the children, as if departing knowledge is only for the men. No, that is not the case. And if you take away anything from these noble women, it is that they spent their entire life dedicated to spreading knowledge. Don't get me wrong, I am a mother of 3 children myself. I am a housewife. I spend my entire day looking after my children and my family. But we cannot deny that spreading knowledge and educating is a responsibility of both men and women. And nowhere does it say it's only a man's responsibility to spread knowledge. So we need to encourage our sisters to hold majalis, to seek an education, just like Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam, to spread knowledge, just like Sayeda Zainab. And only then we will see society flourish. Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam reached a stage of knowledge and greatness that even Abdullah ibn Abbas, which is known for his great knowledge, he said, if I ever had a problem tackling an issue, I used to refer to Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam, and he would then say, Haddathatni al-Aqila Zainab. This is the level of knowledge this woman reached, that many people used to come to her for answers in accordance to Islamic matters, and this happened all the time. And sometimes those whom you educate will have an everlasting impact on their life. Those who you educate will have an everlasting impact, and the beauty of spreading knowledge, and your words are so powerful. knowledge is so powerful. We all should be seekers of knowledge. We all should want to spread knowledge. So so now we have this context. We see that this is displayed beautifully in the interactions of Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam and Hind in Sham. So before we move on to the sermon which Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam delivered directly addressing Yazid, let us look at the interaction and communication between Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam and Hind. Now, as we mentioned in the first episode where we discussed the situation in Kufa, we mentioned that many people were deceived into believing that the captives being brought were rebels and that the killings and captivity was a major victory. And a similar scenario was also mentioned was also happening in Sham. And one of those people who had been deceived was Hind, the wife of Yazid. Now she was told to put on her best clothing and to prepare herself for this gathering organized by her husband, as his army had defeated, as he said, and captured these rebels, as he put it. Okay, so let's picture the scenario. When Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam and the women and children had arrived, Hind approached the captives, and with her were numerous maids. And it's very important to narrate this interaction, because when Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam saw her, she noticed Hind and she recognized her. But Hind did not recognize Zainab because of how much she changed physically due to the torture, sorrows that she had gone through. Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam whispered to Kulthum, "Do you recognize her?" Kulthum replies, "By God, I don't." And Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam said she was our maid. Now you see, Hind was a maid in the household of Imam Ali. Not only that, she used to attend regular classes and used to sit in the company of Zainab alayhi salam and learn from her. So when Hind approached them and asked them, she approached Zainab alayhi salam and said, "Inform me, which country do you belong to?" It is then said that Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam replies, "From the city of Medina." It was then when Hind hears the name of Medina, she descended from her throne and she said, "The residents of Medina have my best salams." It was then that Hind says, "I would like to ask you about a household in Medina, the household of Ali ibn Abi Talib." Zainab alayhi salam asked her, "And how do you know about that household?" Now bear in mind that Zainab already recognized Hind, but she asks this to clarify to the people present there so they can hear. A very clever and well calculated way to speak to ensure everything is clarified to those who are present. Hind at this point gets very heated and says, "I was a maid there. I would like to ask you about Hussein, his siblings and his children, and to ask you about my mistress Zainab and the rest of Fatima's female relatives." And that is when tears began to fall from Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam's eyes, and she told Hind, "Oh Hind, if you ask about the house of Ali, and so we have left it to grieve its occupants. If you ask about Hussein, then there is the head of Hussein between the hands of Yazid. And if you ask about Abbas and the rest of the sons of Ali, then all have been beheaded and killed on the plains of Karbala. And Hind, if you ask about Zain al-Abidin, then there he is, ill over there and incapable of even standing from the extent of his illness. And Hind, if you ask about Zainab, then I am Zainab, the daughter of Ali." One of the most powerful exchanges of words and one of the most heartbreaking scenes you will ever see. When Hind hears this, narrations tell us that she fainted and became unconscious and began to wail and cry and said, "I wish I had been blind before this day." She ran out crying and weeping, and narrations say that Yazid ran after her and put some sort of cover on her to try to comfort her. And she cries out, "Oh Yazid, do you feel protective over me? You put this cover over me while the daughters of Fatima, you have removed their covers. For there is no God but Allah, and I will not enter your protection until they enter with me too." Inshallah, in the next episode, we shall focus on the topic of hijab and talk more about the hijab of Lady Zainab alayhi salam, as well as the role of hijab in our own life, which is very important. I believe this exchange of communication between Sayeda Zainab and Hind is very powerful. Now, before we end, I want to mention a very important point. Now, I am sure we have all read about the image of Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam, her physical image, and how it changed so much during the Battle of Karbala. We know that Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam's posture, her appearance changed, that when she returned back to Medina, she was completely unrecognizable. Her hair had turned white, her back was bent, and she didn't live a very long life after, as the memories of Karbala and the trauma that she had experienced forever haunted her memory, and she grieved so much as to what she had witnessed. And but when we hear about the speech, and when we hear about her interactions and the address to the tyrants, it is the most powerful and bravest image that comes to mind. We do not even consider or really think about all the torture she had gone through. This is a lesson we can all take with us. My dear brothers and sisters, this world will sometimes beat you down to your knees. You may feel you are drowning in a sea of responsibility, or you may seem to fall into one tribulation after another. You may feel like you are barely keeping your head above water. But what we can learn from Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam is that even if the world beats you down, and even if it's to the extent whereby it changes your physical appearance, never let it change you inside. Inside, be like a lion. Be brave, keep your faith in Allah. Let your words and your interactions echo the words and interactions of the brave and courageous ones. Although the unfortunate circumstances changed Sayeda Zainab's physical appearance, it never changed her inside. It never changed her faith in Allah. It never changed her determination. She continued to educate the people. She continued to inform the people. And she continued in her duties. It wasn't a case of just defending a personal matter, but she was defending the religion as a whole. She spoke up even at the expense of her own life and the responsibility. She could have lost her own life, but she spoke in the face of the biggest tyrant that existed, despite the killings she witnessed and the harsh treatments that she herself had to go through. She wanted to shake people's conscience, to awaken people, and you, my brothers and sisters, should make it your priority. It should be our priority to awaken people, to spread knowledge. We will spend hours clicking through our phones, doing God knows what, but we don't have the time or the determination or the courage to spend hours or our hours or days on education and creating change in this world. We are weak, and I am not talking about physically, but mentally. We have no determination, and that's one thing we need to change from today onwards. In honor of Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam, and after the Battle of Karbala, it was her verbal fight that shakes the entire dynasty to its feet. And this shows that women have the power to build and overthrow a whole dynasty. All that, and when Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, who never expected to be talking to such a knowledgeable and courageous woman, when he said to her, "Zainab, tell me, how did you find the way Allah treated your brother and your family?" And Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam replied with one of the most beautiful and replies with a tone full of pride and power, and she said, "I saw nothing but beauty," which was indicating her faith and submission towards Allah. Don't worry, you can shake me, but you can never shake my submission and faith in Allah. That is something you will never be able to shake. And when she began the sermon, when addressing Yazid, she began by saying, "Praise be to Allah, the Lord of the worlds, and blessings on my grandfather, the chief of divine prophets." The most beautiful way to begin a sermon and speech, by thanking Allah. She started the sermon by praising Allah, which portrays her level of submission and faith in Allah. Many people go through life and the sight the slight misfortune shakes their faith and belief in God and religion. But we need to do what we need to do is praise Allah in the good times and the bad, have faith in Allah and the plan He has set for us. And even if we find ourselves in the most difficult, the most traumatic and the most unbearable situations, let's start by thanking Him and all praise to Him. Thank you all for watching today's episode, and inshallah in the next episode we shall continue with Sayeda Zainab alayhi salam's sermon in Sham when she addresses Yazid. There are so many lessons we can learn from, which I hope to briefly touch upon in the next 2 episodes, inshallah. In the next episode we shall focus on the concept of hijab. Join me then, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.